Welcome to episode 7 of Her Game, Her Voice, a podcast about women in sports. For those who are new here, I'm Sophie Brogadier.
And I'm Isla Wilson.
And today we are joined by a very special guest, Frankie de la Cretaz, who is a freelance writer who works about kind of in the intersection of a lot of different types of sports and different types of
gender, culture,
everything. And we'll let them explain a little bit more about their work. But we want to give them a big thank you for giving us some of their time today and being willing to be a guest on this podcast. And we actually met Frankie at the Boston Legacy game that we were at.
Yes.
Where we had our credentials, and they were so kind to us
sweet.
and were just talking
100%.
with us after the press conference. So, Isla, do you want to get
I would
our
love
interview
to.
started?
Yeah, and so my first question is going to be, have you always known that you wanted to be a writer? Did that come about later?
I actually had a career change when I was 30. So I was a social worker first. That is what I did in the beginning. But I think I always wanted to be a writer. I just didn't know how you do that, if that makes sense. Like I always had a blog for fun because I grew up during the heyday of blogging, and I did that regularly. And that was something, that I did and learned how to cultivate an audience, and, kind of publish content regularly, but I didn't think it could be a job. And then I ended up getting pushed out of my social work job when I was on maternity leave after having my first child. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And I needed to make money while being at home with a newborn. And a friend of mine who had read my blog was like, I think you're pretty good at writing. Have you considered doing it for a living? And I thought it was a joke, and it wasn't. And that kind of, it really took off from there.
Yeah, and can you tell us just a little bit about the type of writing you do for those who aren't familiar with your work?
Yeah, so I write at the intersection of sports and gender, sports and culture. And I really think of my work as being sports writing for people who think they don't like sports, and sports writing that doesn't center like cis men. So gender diverse athletes and women's sports is from a queer lens is really what I do. And I've written, a book. I'm the co-author of a book about professional women's football in the US called Hail Mary. And I've had bylines pretty much everywhere. And I also write a queer sports newsletter called Out of Your League.
And so actually one of my follow-up questions is about your book. You just said it's titled Hail Mary. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind that and what made you want to write about women's football?
That book is something that I think is probably the biggest gift of my career. I don't know how often you come across a professional sports league that has never been documented before, but I did. Me and my co-author Lindsay Darkangelo, and we had set out. I used to be a columnist at a feminist magazine called Bitch Magazine that sadly no longer exists, but I was writing a column about women's tackle football. And I like incorporating history in my work. If you read any of my work, you'll know that that's kind of a hallmark of what I do. And I was like, there must be a book about women's football somewhere. And there just wasn't. There really wasn't. And I was complaining to Lindsay, who ended up writing the book with me, that there was not a book. And she said, well, why don't you write one? And I was like, well, you know more about football than I do, so why don't we write it together? And it originally was going to be a much broader book about the history of women in American football, kind of generally, on the field, on the sidelines, in the stands. And that book didn't sell. But in the course of doing that research, we came across the National Women's Football League, which was the first professional women's football league in the US. It was in the 1970s and 80s, and it had been largely undocumented. And so we were able to track down these women who had played football, 40 years ago, and interview them and collect their stories. And we got to tell them. And I still think like I said, it feels like a gift to have been able to write that book.
That sounds really wonderful. And I'm kind of going to go off the fact that your book was talking about women's football. What is your favorite sport to write about?
Currently, I write mostly about women's basketball and the WNBA. But I think that my like first language when we talk about sport is baseball. I started my sports writing career covering baseball, Major League Baseball, the Red Sox. Uh, and the more time I spent with male athletes, the less I wanted to give them any good press because the less I liked them. And so I really transitioned into covering women's sports. So I will say that the league I like to write the most about is the WNBA, but the sport I really enjoy writing about is baseball.
I mean, you obviously have been writing for a long time now and you consider yourself a full sports writer. What is a piece of advice that you would give to young and aspiring sports writers?
This is a really, really hard field to break into. It's incredibly saturated. And I'm someone who has been independent or freelance my entire career. I've never been employed in a newsroom or specifically on a beat. And so that has meant that I've really, really had to find my own stories and be really proactive about getting my work out there. I would say that part of I think what has made me really successful is being able to identify the places that coverage is lacking and filling that space. So everyone wants to write about LeBron James, right? Or, the Red Sox, and those are really, really hard places to break in covering. And so for me, I really looked at both what was missing from coverage and what I wanted to read that I wasn't seeing. And those are really the angles that I found to be able to write my work. And I think when you look at my portfolio, what you'll see is that I write about sports, but when you look at the places that I've written for so many places that aren't just sports publications because I'm trying to be really creative about who the audience for the work is and how I can appeal kind of outside the box.
That's really inspiring. And I know that when we met you at the Legacy game, you had mentioned that before your career in writing about women's sports, you had written about men's sports. And so I was kind of wondering if you could tell us about the difference between writing about men's sports as compared to women's sports.
I have found, I mean, I enjoy writing about women's sports a lot better. Personally, I enjoy the athletes. I feel like I can root for them as people. The closer I got in, men's sports to the people in the front offices, the people in the locker rooms, the more I just personally didn't like them. And it's hard to want to write about people who I think sometimes feel like maybe they would like dislike you as a person. As at the time I was a woman, I'm now like identify, I'm trans and I'm queer. And so many of the players actively vote against my rights. And it was just not fun for me. And I found that I was losing the joy for the sport as I did it. And so um, switching to women's sports kind of really reignited my passion. And I write about it at all levels. I write about gender diverse athletes. I just write about stories that I think are really interesting. And I will say that what part of the difference I have found also when I first broke into sports writing and I was writing about men's sports, I regularly got like death threats. I got threats of like violence from commenters. I was harassed a lot online. It was really like I had a publication that had to hire private security detail for my house after I wrote something about, some local sports radio hosts. And that does not happen to me in the same way writing about women's sports really doesn't. The audience is very different. They're engaging in much better faith. And so those I think are massive differences when it comes to being able to do my job.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sorry for what you had to go through with that. But on a little more positive note, what does it feel like to have your work published in major publications such as the New York Times and Vogue?
It still sometimes doesn't feel like real. It's funny to I've been, doing this for a very long time. And I've won awards, I've written magazine cover stories. That is really cool, but it like never gets old I remember the first time I was in an airport. I don't know why I feel like airport newsstands are somehow like that must mean like you've really made it because people see it. But I was in an airport and it was during the month that I had written the cover story for Runner's World magazine on Nikki Hiltz, who was the first trans and non-binary track and field athlete in the Olympics. And I had written that cover story, and I like walk into the airport like newsstand, and my story is like sitting there looking at me, and I don't know. It was a moment where I was just like, oh wow, does this feels real? This it's just very cool, and I think it's something that never gets old either. Like you had the experience of being credentialed at a professional sporting event, and no matter how many times I'm backstage or talking to an athlete or in a press box, it still feels, I think, like a privilege to get to have the experience of that side of the game.
Yeah, and that's really cool. And I know Sophie and I are hoping to get to your level. But I know that we were both talking about work that you had published. But moving forward and looking at your career moving on, do you have any things you're working on right now or any career aspirations for the future?
I'd like to write a second book. I've been working on a book proposal on and off for a while now. My goal for the year is to get it done and try to start the process of maybe selling a second book. So that is something that is on my radar. And, the media industry has changed a lot since I started working in it. There's a lot fewer places that take freelance work, there's a lot fewer just like publications in general. And that is where my newsletter comes in. I've been able to supplement my freelance work with my newsletter, which has like we have a subscriber Discord, a book club. I do events, and I do reporting there as well. I have an editor and a media lawyer. Like I'm being able to actually publish some of the work that I can't place elsewhere. And I miss when all my income could come from pitching and freelancing for other outlets. I actually prefer that model of journalism, but right now that's not the world we live in. And so I feel really fortunate to have cultivated enough of an audience that they will follow me kind of wherever I am, and I get to create and build my own like place. And so that has been something I've been really leaning into this year.
Yeah, and that's so amazing. And we kind of have a signature question that we like to end our interviews with. And so, what is a message you have for young people and specifically young girls, as our podcast really focuses on women's sports? But what is a message you have for young people out there, either looking to be a professional athlete or really like break into the sports industry in any field?
I would say, and I think this is true whether you're an athlete or you're trying to break into sports media or broadcasting or coaching, whatever it is, I think that this is a field that is really hard to break into. A lot of people want to do it, and you're going to face rejection quite a bit. I do in my career a lot. And I think what has made me as good at what I do and has enabled me to break into as many places as I've been able to is that I try not to take rejection personally, and I use it as motivation. If someone rejects a story, I become convinced that I need to show them that it's a good story, and I will pitch it until I place it. Sometimes I pitch 30 times before it lands. Sometimes I put it down for a year and pick it up again and try again. Um, and I think remembering that rejection just makes you better at what you do because you can take that as feedback. You can take that as, well, I just haven't found the right place yet. And it's really not personal usually. And so you have to have tough skin. And I think if you can reframe the way you think about, not getting the job or not, landing the pitch, it can be really helpful because otherwise it can really tear you down.
Yeah, I think that was a beautiful response. And thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. And I think that your interview was very inspirational. I liked that you highlighted both the positives and the negatives of doing journalism and being in the sports industry, because I think that there are both sides definitely to it. But we thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well,
I loved that interview.
yes, that was really nice.
That was really nice.
They gave us such inspirational and
answers.
I mean, as we always like to touch on, sports isn't only the highlights.
No.
And so I think, especially for us as we're trying to break into this industry, to hear that obviously you will get rejected, and what they went through some of the time was horrible.
Unacceptable.
But
it's
really helpful to actually hear that, and like that happened to a real person, that can happen, and just like keep that in the back of your mind a little bit.
And I really liked that they touched on what they went through as a person who was feeling out of place, because I think that's really something that we've touched on. I mean, last week we were talking about one of the sports journalists who was told to go make a sandwich, and I think I liked that Frankie highlighted the fact that they felt uncomfortable in a male-dominated sport, in a male-dominated place, because they didn't feel like the athletes were respecting their work.
Correct. And we like to touch on all sides. We completely hear what happened to them, but we are also not trying to bash on all men's sports.
Because I'm sure there are many men's sports, and I think that they have done a better job of trying to be inclusive of everyone, especially like going up.
And so I just want to kind of like restate that the purpose of our podcast isn't to be anti-men's sports.
No.
We are both big men's sports
100%.
fans and like watching men's sports, but we
the
really
NHL.
want to highlight the growing women's sports industry and all the good things that come with that.
100%. And we're kind of going to shift gears because we have a big game tonight, PWHL playoffs. Montreal's up 2-1 in the series. It's a best of 5. And I'm really looking forward to that game. Montreal won the first 2 games, and then they lost game 3. And so they'll play tonight in Ottawa.
Game 4, it's in Ottawa. Ottawa has the momentum coming off that game 3 win.
100%.
And so
they needed that win.
And I think they have the ability to send it to a game 5. I think ultimately Montreal will win, but I think it would be a really exciting game 5, and it would be so competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think they found a way to claw back somehow in game 3. So like you said, they're going to be coming off with that momentum. They're going to be hungry. They're at home. So I think it's going to be a really fun matchup tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
And yet again, we talked about how
they just keep popping up.
PWHL is really giving us so much to talk about.
Just literally the teams just keep multiplying. And I'm loving it.
It's amazing. We're up to 12 now. San Jose is going to be the 12th team next year.
I feel like DJ Khaled. We just keep saying another one. Literally. I feel like I'm seeing the meme of him point. Because literally, last episode, we talked about 2 or 3 teams?
We talked about
that were
2, but that would bring it to 11.
And now we have San Jose.
And so the league is going to look completely different last year.
Completely different.
Because they're adding 50%.
Yeah.
Going from 8 to 12 in one season. First of all, that's miraculous. That they have the revenue and the ability to do that in one season. Not just adding 2 at a time, 1 at a time, but 4 in one season is crazy.
People watch women's sports.
People watch women's sports. We need to get t-shirts.
But I think it's so amazing that they only started this league a couple years ago. And I know, I think a lot of people are probably expecting it, hockey's popular, but it's not completely, but it's definitely a different game compared to the men's. And I think a lot of people were probably expecting it to take some time to be popular, to be noticed, to get the type of deals and, coverage that they're getting. And it's just so inspirational to see that people are positively meeting something that is just so fun. Because it's just such a fun sport to watch, and I love that these athletes are finally getting the recognition that they deserve.
100%. And the Olympics this year definitely helped both for Canada and the U.S. And that'll help.
Such a fun game to watch.
It really is.
It was really nerve-wracking, but it was really exciting to watch, and a beautiful overtime goal. Oh, still beautiful. And she's one of the Fleet players, so love Megan Keller.
And so last episode, we touched on tennis for really the first time. We mentioned that there's the potential French Open boycott. But in more positive news, women are getting a 35% increase in prize money for the Queen's Club tournament.
Yes, and so that tournament is one of the oldest tennis tournaments in the world, actually, and it serves as a grass court warm-up for Wimbledon, which is coming up in July.
Yes, and so we didn't really mention this last time, but in the Grand Slam, if you don't know, there are 4 tournaments. There's Wimbledon, the U.S. Open, the French Open, and the Australian Open. I didn't say those in order.
But you know what? You got all
They are
four.
played on 3 different surfaces. There are hard courts, clay
Grass,
courts, and grass
grass.
courts, for those who don't know tennis. And so Wimbledon is the grass court tournament. And
Yes.
so it is a very different surface to play on. I have never played tennis on grass, but just from watching, you can see that it's so different than both clay and hard
The
court.
ball bounces differently. It's a 100% different game.
And so that tournament that we're talking about, the
Queen's tournament.
Yes.
Is
Queen's
Queen's Court
Yes.
tournament. The players play in it as a warm up for the grass court at Wimbledon, so that they can kind of get used to it, because Wimbledon ends. Yeah, no, it's the second to last in the overall season, because the U.S. Open ends it. But they have not played on grass for a while. So, but I mean, we have to talk about the money.
Yes, so the total prize for women will raise by $500,000. That's
$500,000.
$500,000. That's not a small amount, and so it will be almost $2 million.
Almost
total.
$2 million, yeah, $1.915 million. I mean, that is incredible.
Yeah, and not only that, but the Lawn Tennis Association is going to deliver equal prize money to women's and men's by June 2029, the latest.
It's incredible.
I mean, that's what we were talking about last episode,
Yes.
about how tennis viewership isn't all that different between
No.
men's and women's. And so they should be receiving that equal pay
And
in
I feel
that
like
sport specifically.
When I am a huge fan of tennis, and my family loves to watch all of the big tournaments. And I mean, when you're watching it, there's not really that big of a difference in the crowd size, like you were saying.
Yeah, and I understand, okay, maybe in some of the preliminary, if I can say my
Hey,
words correctly.
you've got this.
The preliminary matches, sure, they might be lesser known female
Yeah.
players, and the men's names could still be more known, especially if they're like an older player coming back, whatever. But by the later rounds, it's pretty much the same.
I mean, you've Goff, Sabalenka. I mean, you
Yeah.
have huge names and amazing athletes. So I was really happy to see that, especially after we had talked about tennis last week. I was like, oh, this is perfect. I was like, I can't wait to add that to the script.
Yes, and as we mentioned earlier, just showing both sides of women's sports, how we talked about that there was a discrepancy in the pay last week and that could cause a potential boycott, and then we have this amazing
And then
news
this
just a
amazing
week
news.
later.
Uh-huh.
And so
That's
I
perfect.
feel like that's really the theme of this episode,
It is.
like highlighting the good and the bad.
There's positives and negatives to everything.
Yes. And so we'll be back for one more episode this season.
Which is crazy. I can't believe how far we've come.
I know. I mean, I've kind of mentioned this to a lot of different people, but I am thinking about writing my college essay about this podcast and all like the values it's taught me and how I really it was a dream even just a few months ago, but
Oh, yeah, we brought it up so casually in class one day.
No, we brought it up so casually.
was-
And Miss Shatterley, our teacher, we love her. She is our
Love
second
her.
mother, basically.
Literally a second mother. I miss
And
her already so
she
much.
was like, we've had some podcasts in the past. You guys have to make it good. And we were
us.
like, Shat, we will come
Don't
through.
you worry.
We will make it good. And here we are today. And so,
It just shows that if you put your mind and heart into anything, it can come true.
yeah, if you put in a little work, you can take your passions, you can take your dreams and make them come true. They don't have to stay dreams.
Exactly. And I think kind of going back on something that Frankie mentioned, they mentioned how they were looking to write about and talk about sports that weren't covered.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's cool because we're doing something and we have an outlet that is not traditional. And it's not something like a general like sports talk show or something like that. And I like that it's different because I think that gives us a different outlet talking about sports.
For sure. And I mean, obviously, bringing awareness to the sports that we know and love, but the whole world is still catching up to.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so we will be back.
One
Episode
more
8 next
episode.
week. We're going to welcome a very, very special
Very
guest.
special guest.
We're so excited. She is a professor and a sports writer. She teaches at Northwestern, and she's been a sports writer for ESPN and the Chicago Bulls. Her name is Melissa Isaacson, and we are honored.
Ooh, we're giving a name.
I'm going to give her name.
You're not going to make them
Do
wait?
a little research
You're
before.
not going to make them wait?
Yes, not. But we will give more information about that next week. We are so happy to be able to welcome her. And stay tuned for the finale on season 1.
Thank you.